In this video, we'll be talking about personal pronouns. We'll talk about what exactly a personal pronoun is, what they look like in Latin, and of course, how to translate them into English. Some information about personal pronouns. First of all, as a reminder, a pronoun is a word which will replace a noun in a sentence. The noun that the pronoun replaces is called its antecedent. For a personal pronoun, these will have a person as the antecedent. This is the same type of person that we'll talk about when we talk about the subject of a verb, such as first, second, or third person. For the first and second person personal pronouns in Latin, these will be the words ego, tu, nos, and vos. We'll talk about third person in just a little bit, but for now we're going to focus on the first and second person personal pronouns. For the first person singular personal pronoun, this would be the word that we would translate into English as either I or me. In the nominative, we'll use the Latin word ego. The genitive is mei, the dative mihi, and then both the accusative and the ablative is me. For the first person plural, these are the words that we will translate into English as either we or us. For the nominative, we have the form nos, in longo s. You'll notice here that there are two genitive forms, nostrum and nostri. These two words are not interchangeable, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. The dative is nobis. The accusative looks the same as the nominative, nos, and the ablative is going to match up with the dative, nobis. And so we see here all the forms of the first person personal pronouns, the singular word being ego and the plural word being nos, and the various forms of each of those words. For the second person singular, which in English is the word you, we have the word tu. The genitive is tui, the dative tibi, and both the accusative and the ablative are te. You may notice that some of the forms of tu are very similar to some of the forms of ego. The second person plural, which is also you in English, or of course y'all if you live in the South, has as a nominative vos. Once again, there are two genitive forms, vestrum and vestri. And just like the forms with the first person, these are not interchangeable. The dative is vobis. The accusative will once again match the nominative vos. And the ablative, as we often see in the plural, matches the dative, vobis. And here we see all the forms side by side, the forms of tu and the forms of vos. A few important things to keep in mind when talking about the personal pronouns of the first and second person. First of all, the gender of a pronoun is identical to its antecedent. This is important to note because the first and second person personal pronouns do not have different forms depending upon the gender. But the gender of the pronoun can at times be important. There are times when the pronoun might be modified by an adjective, or the pronoun may be the subject of a sentence containing a linking verb. And after the linking verb, the predicate nominative could be an adjective. And if it is, it would need to agree with the subject in gender. And for that, we would need to know the gender of the antecedent. As we've mentioned before, the plural personal pronouns have two genitives each. They are not interchangeable, but rather they are used depending upon how the genitive is being used in the sentence. We'll talk about that in a different video, but not in this one. The last thing to know is that the genitive of a pronoun is not used to show possession. If you want to show possession, say that something is my, our, or your item, instead of using a pronoun, you would use a possessive adjective, words like meus and tous. Now that we've talked about the first and second personal pronoun, let's talk about the word is. The nominative forms are is, ai, id. Is, ai, id is a weak demonstrative. However, it is often used as a personal pronoun of the third person. There is no true third person personal pronoun, but is, ai, id is used in such a manner with such frequency that we can consider it to be the third person personal pronoun. Is, ai, id will refer to an object that was either previously mentioned or one that is about to be mentioned. Some common translations are going to be he, she, it, this, or that, along with other forms of those words, such as the plurals, they, these, and those, and of course other case forms as well, him, her, its, and so forth. The best translation of is, ai, id is always going to be dependent on the antecedent and not the gender of the pronoun. And this is one of those things that's important to keep in mind, because sometimes a word in Latin will have a masculine or feminine gender, but the pronoun that we would use to replace it in English would be neuter, it. For instance, if we're talking about a seat, which in Latin would be sella, that is a feminine noun. If we were to replace it in the sentence with a pronoun, ea, we would use a feminine form of is, ai, id. But we would not refer to it as a she in English. We would refer to the seat as an it. When we look at the singular forms of is, ea, id, we see that those are the three nominatives. Is for the nominative masculine, ea for the feminine, and id for the neuter. As we move to the genitive, we'll see that regardless of the gender, eius will be the genitive form. Unlike the first and second person, eius may be used to show possession, as long as the possessor is not also the subject of the sentence. If the possessor is the subject of the sentence, we would use the adjective suis. You may notice that these end with ius. That is not consistent with any of our noun forms. However, this is consistent with several other pronouns when it comes to the genitive. The dative is going to look like very many other pronoun forms in that it is going to end with a long I, and will again be the same for all three genders, ae being the form here. As we move to the accusative, we'll see that these have first and second declension forms. For the masculine, we see a um ending in eum. For the feminine, an am ending, eam. And as we have seen numerous times before, the accusative will be matching the nominative in the neuter with id as its form. The ablative, like the accusative, will follow first and second declension endings. The masculine ending with long o, eo, the feminine with a long a, ea, and the neuter ending with a long o, eo. The plural forms we'll find will also follow traditional first and second declension patterns. You'll see the masculine ending with long I, ei, the feminine ending with ae, ei, and the neuter ending with a short a, ea. The genitive, we'll see again follows the patterns that we would expect. The masculine ending with long orum, eorum, the feminine long arum, eorum, and the neuter being the same as the masculine with the long orum ending, eorum. The dative, regardless of its gender, will be the same with the long is ending, eis. The accusative continues in that first and second declension pattern format, with a long OS in the masculine for eos, a long AS in the feminine, eos, and once again the accusative neuter will match the nominative neuter with ea. Finally, we have the ablative plural, which once again matches the dative plural and has a long is ending for all three genders with the form of aes. With that, you have now seen the first and second person personal pronouns, and also the forms of is, id, which will work as third person personal pronouns. Use this as you continue to look at new Latin words and Latin sentences.